Hmm. Hare Krishna. Hmm. This class on Saturday this is discussing Prabhupada Leelas in terms of examples that perhaps we might overlook that are not so obvious. Or maybe it's just examples we don't know about, we've never heard. And, you know, very inspiring to hear about great personalities. People do that all the time. They read biographies, right? And as we discussed in the course on humility, sometimes it's difficult to relate to a Uttama Adhikari, a topmost devotee, because they're so different from us. Their consciousness is completely different. Their actions, therefore, are completely different. And it's very easy to look at their activities and think, wow, that's amazing. Not me. I could never do that. And then kind of by thinking, I can't do that, it's possible to eliminate any benefit that we could personally and practically get from their activities. Because we just think, well, it's another realm. And so the purpose of these classes on Saturday is to try to take these very elevated activities and see what's in it for us that we could inspire us. Because certainly it would be a shame not to be inspired by what Prabhupada did. I think some things are more obvious. Prabhupada did something and it's like, yeah, I should do that. I can do that. I can follow that. And some things are, I could never do that. And we don't really know how to relate to it. And so I was giving some examples, and I was also asking you to give some examples of things that Prabhupada did, either whether you understand how we can be inspired from it practically or not, to give some examples. And I'll give one example. I think this is more obvious in terms of what we can learn from it, but I could be wrong. Maybe there's more to learn from it than we think. And this is in line with the humility course, since that's in our minds now. And it's also in line with what I was doing this morning that caused me to forget about all of you. I was working on a paper on spiritual abuse. And it's a course for prospective gurus. So they understand what it is and how sometimes inadvertently we can commit it, we can abuse somebody. And then we give examples from Srila Prabhupada, how he didn't do those things. And one of the problems that you will face if you ever become a leader or you ever have authority over another person, and it could be a mother, father, could be a temple president, could be a bhakti vriksha leader, could be just a small group of devotees that you're in charge of. Anytime you have authority, there's, and I think we saw this last night in the humility course, there's a need to look good. And one of the reasons we want to look good is because, I'm your teacher, so I don't want you to think there's something wrong with me. I don't want you to think I'm not Krishna conscious, right? And therefore, if I do something wrong, it can be difficult to admit it. Even I know it's wrong because, well, I'm in a leading position. And it's can be embarrassing to admit a mistake. because I'm not supposed to make mistakes. That's not true that I'm not supposed to make mistakes. Well, maybe true to some degree, but there are examples of Prabhupada apologizing. And an apology is generally an admittance that I made a mistake, isn't it? And I think our concept of leader, especially of a guru, is number one, they don't make mistakes, and they would have no need to apologize because they wouldn't make mistakes, because they're supposed to be perfect. And we have discussed before how humility, we have humility, it's quite easy to apologize and admit mistakes. That goes along with the humility. So there were various times where Prabhupada apologized to his disciples. It's not really a traditional model of guru-disciple relationship, but it's more of a human model. And there's one story, I don't know if you know this. There's a couple stories, I don't know if you know this. But Prabhupada's son was visiting him, and Prabhupada was asking about his ex-wife, his son's mother, and what's going on. And Prabhupada said, I was a very bad husband. She was a very good wife. I was a very bad husband. He's admitting that to his son. And I guess it was kind of in the mood of apology for not being a great husband. And then one time, there were some times when Prabhupada wanted something and it finally came like too late and he was upset. Why is it taking so long? I needed this an hour ago. And then the devotee would explain, well, we couldn't get it, wasn't available. We had to go here and there to get it. And then Prabhupada would apologize. And one time he said, in my old age, I'm becoming angry. So he was willing to say something like that. I was a bad husband. At my old age, I'm just becoming, I don't know if he said angry or used another word, but he wasn't afraid to apologize. And of course, there's no one in ISKCON who had a higher position than Prabhupada. So we will never have such a high position. I've told the story before, which is one of the most amazing stories. Probably you've all have heard it. Prabhupada was in Hawaii. Hawaii is composed of different islands. And there's one devotee named Gaur Sundar who started the Hawaii temple, but he had left. And he was on another island. And there was a project on the other island, I believe, a farm. And Prabhupada said, let's go see the farm. They went to the island and he never saw the farm. When he got there, he said, where's Gaur Sundar? I want to meet him. And so he met him. And Prabhupada said, what have I done that caused you to leave? Like Prabhupada was amazingly, he was taking responsibility for Gaur Sundar leaving. Isn't that amazing? Wow. What have I done to cause you to leave? Wow. And he really loved Gaur Sundar and he really wanted him to come back. And um, there's another story, not exactly an apology, but maybe similar. There's another story where early in the movement, and early in the movement was very small. There was only one temple and it was like a family. Uh, All the temples were like families in the early days because they were all small and everybody was full time, so everyone was like together all the time. So it was like a family, or most everyone was full time. And one devotee wanted to leave Krishna consciousness. So naturally, as a spiritual master, you would try to convince them, maybe even chastise them. Why are you leaving? This is foolish. Don't do it. Why are you not following me, etc. So Prabhupada had a conversation with this devotee, and Prabhupada saw that this devotee had to leave, was not ready for Krishna conscious commitment, etc. And so they parted on friendly terms. And there was really nothing Prabhupada could do to keep him to stay, and he didn't try because he saw that. And then Prabhupada told the other disciples, he said, better we part as friends than enemies. Like, he could have chastised him, and they would have parted as enemies. So it was kind of like an apology in a sense that at least I'm not going to chastise you. And I'm the guru, you're the fool, you're doing something foolish. Guru has a right to chastise, even a duty to chastise, sometimes, right? But just because I have the right, even the duty, doesn't mean I should, because it may not be the right thing to do. And it may not be the best thing for the disciple. So if you ever have a position of authority over anyone, there's a natural tendency to feel like, as the authority, whatever I do is right. And everyone under me needs to recognize that. There's some other examples, maybe not of apology, but of Prabhupada in a position of authority. Let's maybe we can broaden this and let's say Prabhupada in the position of authority, not taking advantage of that position. Because if I'm authority, I could take advantage and say, you have to do this. And you say, I don't think it's good for me. No, you have to. But, if I do this, then this will be bad. No, you have to do it. Like an authority, in a sense, has the right to enforce. But authority doesn't have the right to abuse, and in enforcing, you may be abusing. So most of the time, when Prabhupada wanted someone to do something, he said, would you like to do this? Did you know that? Now, sometimes with a GBC, sannyasi, like that, he might say, go here. I want you to go here. And there was no question of not going there, even if the disciple objected. But I think it was more common for Prabhupada to say, would you like to do this, or where would you like to go? And Prabhupada said, you may have read this letter, that you can't force because, devotional service is voluntary. And by saying, would you like to do this? And if you say yes, it's better because that means of your own will, you're agreeing to do something. And you're more likely to be inspired to do it rather than if I say you have to do it. Maybe you don't want to do it. Maybe it's not inspiring. So, um, so in many cases, in deciding people's service, it would be like that. Not always, Prabhupada might say, I want you to do this. Of course, many devotees felt free to say, I don't think that's good, or I can't do it. They weren't afraid because Prabhupada left that door open in many cases. So although, you can say the guru is absolute authority, Prabhupada didn't wield absolute authority always. And there are many things he wanted that weren't getting done, that he couldn't get done, even though he was asking. So he couldn't take out the whip and say, if you don't do this, I'll whip you. That wasn't his position. So I think that's an important example for us. If you ever have authority, um, yeah, you can apologize. You can ask, can you do this? Would this be okay? You can admit a fault. If you make a mistake, you can admit it. And we have talked before about admitting faults. And I think that, you might think, well, it's awkward for a leader to admit a fault. But I think the devotees expect that. If a leader makes a mistake, I think the devotees expect them. And to do that. And I think the devotees are let down if a leader makes a mistake and they're not willing to admit it. Like I think it's in a book called Bhajan Rahasya. This book was discovered, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago by a devotee named Narahari Sakara. And in that book, it talks about when a guru deviates, what to do. This is interesting because this happened and we didn't know if there was any authoritative evidence. And this book gives some authoritative evidence. So it says, if a guru falls down or becomes engaged in sensual activity or in some way deviates, the disciples should go to him and ask him, for lack of a better word, get his act together to stop doing those things and regain his Krishna consciousness. It says right in the book, disciples should do that. They should ask their guru to do that. So um, it's not a common thing, but the implication is the guru should listen to the disciple. That's the implication of that, isn't it? And sometimes, in rare cases, that would be necessary. But we can replace guru with any leadership position. And when you're a leader, it's difficult to listen. But oftentimes Prabhupada would ask devotees to do something. They wouldn't say, Prabhupada, you're doing something wrong. But excuse me, that sometimes they wouldn't tell Prabhupada you're doing something wrong, but they might say, well, I'll give you an example. I was speaking to Yogeshwar Prabhu when he was in France with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada gave a lecture. And Prabhupada gave an example that you have to follow the laws of the government. It was an analogy. Like there's laws of the universe. If you don't follow, you're punished, and you have to follow the laws of the government. And the French people were, especially at this time, were very much in a revolutionary mood, and they didn't like the government. And it really upset them that Prabhupada said, just like you have to follow the laws of the government. They didn't like that, and they verbally expressed their upset to Prabhupada. And it was, Prabhupada's on stage and they're firing at him. And you know what Yogeshwar said? He said something really interesting. He said, it was our fault that we didn't tell Prabhupada that this is how the people think and don't talk about this. Or if you talk about this, it'll disturb them. So not that the guru knows everything, especially when he's in another country. So it's not that the disciple wouldn't say, in our country, if you say this, people will get very upset. So please, or if you get very heavy, it's not going to work. Or if you're not heavy enough, it's not going to work. It could be anything, right? And anyway, either in France or Switzerland, there was another event and people got upset. I'm not sure why. And they said, why are you sitting on a big seat? Because the devotees brought the Vyasasan for Prabhupada. Why are you sitting on a big seat? Who do you think you are? You're on the stage on a big seat, like you think you're better than us. And Prabhupada said, no, I don't think I'm better. Then why are you sitting on a big seat? And after that, Prabhupada said, just bring me a chair. Don't bring a seat anymore. So we could have told that to Prabhupada. Is it okay we don't bring a Vyasasan? We just bring a seat because people will get upset. That's probably what we should have done, and Prabhupada would have considered it and most likely would have said yes. He's not attached to sitting on Vyasasan. Prabhupada's attached to communicating Krishna consciousness. So it's not that people under a leader cannot give advice. It's not that that's wrong. It's only wrong when the leader doesn't want it. It's not wrong, but if the leader doesn't want it, it becomes wrong. But as a leader, like Chanakya Pandit says, a leader without counsel will fail. So a king without counsel will fail. So every king had his ministers because they were supposed to be expert in different areas.
Hare Krishna. I'm so sorry. We cannot hear you any longer.
Let's find out the problem. Krishna, Krishna, Hari. Hari,
Now
Hari.
we hear you. Perfect.
Wires. But wires are not happy. Krishna. Cheap wires or cheap mixer. I don't know. Or both are cheap. Krishna, Krishna. Hare, Hare. Hare Ram. Okay. So, a good leader will listen, will take feedback. And then Prabhupada did another thing. Prabhupada felt that outside of India, his disciples were competent for spreading Krishna consciousness because it was their country and they knew how things worked in their country. But he didn't feel they were competent in India. And the devotees were often cheated in India because for us, everything seemed cheap, even though it was 4 times the normal price because it was 5 times cheaper than America, but 4 times higher than the price Indians would pay for it. So we didn't know that. So Prabhupada was more involved in India and just how things work in India. Because we're Westerners, so it's like, oh, Westerners have money, let's raise the price. If you go and have fun in India, go with Hari Bhakti and send Hari Bhakti into a shop and say, Hari Bhakti, ask them how much it costs. And then he'll come out and tell you. Then the next day, go into the shop and ask them how much it costs and see if it's not double. Yeah, sometimes it's like that. Right, Hari Bhakti? Yeah, it can be. Right. So we didn't know that. So sometimes in America, when Prabhupada would make plans, he would ask his disciples, what do you think? Like, you think this is a good idea? And the disciples were embarrassed because, like, Prabhupada, what do I know? And Prabhupada would say, no, no, I want to hear from you. And sometimes it even had nothing to do with the country itself. It just was a question. What do you think? Prabhupada would ask it, what do you think this devotee should do? Do you think he's the right person for this? So it wasn't like Prabhupada felt like he knew everything. And of course, it was awkward for the disciples to say things. And often they would say, whatever you think, Prabhupada. And he would say, no, I want to know what you think. And other times, Prabhupada had disciples who were his secretaries and very close to him, who felt comfortable if Prabhupada said something, saying to Prabhupada, I don't think that's a good idea for these reasons. Because in general, they knew Prabhupada would listen. Okay. And he would listen. And then Prabhupada would say, okay, then we won't do that, or we'll do it the other way. So Prabhupada was attached to doing what's best. He wasn't attached to his position that I can't admit I made a mistake. My disciples telling me that's not a good idea. Who are you to tell me? What do you know? There's no false ego there. It was just, okay, that's the best for preaching. So I think that's an important example that if you're ever in a position of leadership, and all of you eventually will be, as I said, having children as a leadership position, You may be a leader at your work. If you stay a devotee till your hair turns gray, automatically you're respected as a senior. If you want to be respected as a senior now, just dye your hair gray. It works. Well, before you go to Mayapur, dye it gray. And like front rows. You get front row seating and everything. I'm only kidding. But that naturally happens as you become a senior. You're always given some position. And if it's not official, it's unofficial. So we all will be in some position. And I think we see with Prabhupada, he didn't feel entitled because of position. Sometimes he had to exhibit his authority because we were doing something wrong or we didn't know how to do something. But he definitely didn't feel entitled to misuse authority or abuse his authority or not acknowledge a disciple who couldn't do something that he asked them to do. Prabhupada, I can't do this. How dare you disobey me? One of the most famous stories many of you know is a disciple of Prabhupada who was married, who divorced his wife and intended to remarry. And Prabhupada allowed him to do it, which was unusual, especially at that time. And Prabhupada explained that when he read the letter was not asking Prabhupada if I could do it. The letter was telling Prabhupada that this is what I'm doing. There's a difference. It's interesting to get a letter, you're a guru and your disciple says, I've decided to smoke marijuana. It's like, okay. It wasn't how do I give up marijuana? How do I, that wasn't the question. It was like, Guru Maharaj, this is what I'm doing. Like, okay. So it was something like that. And, Prabhupada understands human nature probably better than any of us. And so when he was asked, why did you allow this? And Prabhupada said something really interesting. It's very, very compassionate and very, very sensitive. And it exhibits the fact that he was not attached to his position as guru and he didn't want to use his position to hurt a devotee. And Prabhupada said, from his letter, it was obvious that this is what he was going to do. So if I said, don't do it, which maybe I would have said if he asked, Prabhupada would have said, it's better you don't. Because there was another situation where a devotee wanted to remarry, her husband had left. And Prabhupada said, before he answered the question, he said, you want me to tell you what to do, or you just want my opinion? So Prabhupada was willing to give his opinion and not tell her what to do. And he said, well, my opinion, it's better you don't. But it was kind of like he left it open, like maybe you have to. And so in this letter, Prabhupada said to probably Shruti Kirti or someone who had asked, I could tell he was going to do it. So if I told him not to do it, he would have done it anyway. But if I told him not to do it and he did it, then he would be disobeying my order. And that's an offense. It's an offense to the holy name, the third offense, right? Disobey the order of the spiritual master. So I don't want to give him an order that I know he can't follow because that would be bad for his spiritual life. So I blessed him, or I told him it was okay. Isn't that interesting? Prabhupada didn't use his authority and say, no, this is wrong, it's bad, I'm your guru, you must do what I say. He understood that is not going to work, and what would be the most compassionate and best thing for this devotee would be to let him do it. And so he didn't say, I don't think it's a good idea, nothing, just like, okay. I find that so interesting. So from a position of an authority, in this case, Prabhupada's not attached to his position as the authority. He is attached to his disciples' advancement. And that's what he was thinking. Isn't that interesting? So you can see from all these examples that Prabhupada is not attached to his position. He's attached to what's best for his disciples. And he's willing to adopt various positions, which maybe are not like so traditional, or at least not authoritative in every situation, when he sees what would be best for the disciple. So sometimes he'll say, okay, remarry, and sometimes he'll chastise according to the situation. So there's another story you may have heard. It's also very instructive. Prabhupada told one sannyasi who was in Vrindavan, you shouldn't stay in Vrindavan. Sannyasi shouldn't really stay anymore, stay very long anywhere. Sannyasi should always move. And that way, sannyasi never becomes attached because they're always moving. You get attached when you sit in one place for a long time. And then you start accumulating things. You get very comfortable. And that's kind of the dharma of a grihasta. But that's kind of why you get married, to become comfortable. But it's not why you take sannyas. And almost the way the story goes is almost immediately after that, he told another sannyasi, stay in Vrindavan, because he wanted that sannyasi to be in Vrindavan and manage the temple. So he explained the sannyasi shouldn't stay in one place, he should travel. That was the instruction to that sannyasi. That he immediately told another sannyasi, stay here. So whatever is best for the preaching, whatever is best for the disciple. So Prabhupada was not stereotyped. You know what stereotype means if you're not from America? It's not like one answer for everybody. There's only one answer, this is it. And so the word is nuanced. Nuance means you adapt. So, and as we were reading in the humility course, Prabhupada said, to his disciples, I am your servant. And I think everything we discussed just encapsulates Prabhupada as a servant, doesn't it? Like what is best for my disciple? Not what is best for my false ego, or what is, maybe traditionally the position of the guru. Yeah. I think it's kind of a big thing for a person in Prabhupada's position to apologize to a disciple. But because Prabhupada had no false ego, and he honestly felt maybe I did something to hurt this disciple. Of course, he didn't do anything to hurt it, but it could hurt the disciple, but the disciple could have interpreted it that way, felt that Prabhupada hurt them. So Prabhupada's saying, like, what did I do that hurt you? So I can apologize for that. So I can know not to do that, And so if you're ever dealing with someone and they're hurt, it's good to ask them, what did I do? Or sometimes you just know what you did and you can apologize. Hare Krishna. So that's been my meditation this morning. Chaitanya Dasi says, yeah, that's the story I was thinking of. Chaitanya Dasi says, related to the apology example, this is what Srila Prabhupada told Bhakti True Swami, and that's the story I was thinking of. You see, when one becomes old, one becomes short-tempered, so please don't mind. So perhaps Prabhupada was noticing his impatience in old age. Some devotees say this is the reason why we should not be reading Prabhupada's letters, that his instructions were nuanced and not general. How should we approach this? Well, that's true. The difficulty with the letters, with some of them, not all of them, with some of them, is not knowing the context. So you don't know what Prabhupada's responding to. So you either don't know or you have to guess. But at least if the instruction seems to differ from the general way Prabhupada taught us, then you would understand this is specifically for that devotee. Now, someone could say, rightly, that, well, maybe I'm in the same situation as that devotee, but I just don't know the situation. So, the answer to your question is the letters are important, but don't just read one letter and, take that. It's like, well, what else did Prabhupada say? Because he may have said different things to different devotees. And I was just this morning writing about how we can abuse devotees by just preaching in one particular way, black or white, according to the way we see the world or our preference, without giving 360 degrees. This is, Prabhupada said many things about this, not just one thing. So that can be an issue. What's known as cherry picking. So that's not good. So you want to make sure you understand. If there were more things Prabhupada said about that. There's a funny thing that happened because a lot of devotees discuss what is the position of the letters, like in relation to Prabhupada's books. Or you could even say, what is the position of room conversations or lectures in relation to his books? And one devotee had written a book, and this devotee had expressed his opinion, not in the book, but elsewhere, that the letters were of secondary importance, or not even secondary. They were not to be accepted as absolute or whatever. But what he didn't realize is that in one of the books he wrote, he had over 30, I don't know how many, he had multiple references from Prabhupada's letters to make his points. So in a like a hermeneutical sense, a sense of where you get knowledge, it may make sense to say the letters are of secondary importance, especially because it's time, place, circumstance, and so forth. But it was interesting to see how much this devotee who said that relied on Prabhupada's letters. And it's because there's certain things in the letters that aren't said anywhere else. So if you relegate the letters to a less important position, maybe that's true in terms of Siddhanta, but in terms of practical management, you will find that certain things that Prabhupada wanted us to do are only in the letters. That's the only place you'll find out that he wanted something. Or even a philosophical point that he's clearing up. It's only in the letter that he cleared it up. So that's interesting. So it's hard just to say it's less important. That is something you'll have to see for yourself in a particular time, place, situation. Yeah. Maybe a further answer to your question would be, don't be afraid to apply Prabhupada's instructions in a way that works for you, that maybe not exactly the way it was given to somebody else. And I think we do that a lot. There's an instruction and your reaction is, whoa, I could never do that. Like, I know I can't do that. But that instruction wasn't necessarily for you. And another thing that's important is when you see an instruction, then you think, well, I can't do that. Just say, I can't do it now, but don't reject the instruction, right? To say, I never can do that, that's not good, because it's kind of like putting that out, predicting your future. This will never happen. You could even say, well, I don't know how I could do that, but I'm not going to give up on it. There's a principle which I discussed briefly in the humility course, and we could talk more about it here. There's a principle of you gravitate towards what you're attracted to have or to become. And a popular example given of this in the secular world is because in the secular world, it's very common that people want to become wealthy. And so there's a lot of people who teach how to become wealthy. And one of the ways they teach it is how to have a mindset of a wealthy person. And so what they teach is, one of the things they teach is that often people who want to become wealthy do not like wealthy people. Like sometimes when you want something and you don't have it and someone else has it, you become envious or jealous of that person. You don't like it that they have it, and therefore you don't like them. And the thought that money is evil and people who are wealthy are evil, etc. That's there. It's within society. People who have money are bad people, but wealthy people are bad people. That's there also. And so the principle they teach, which we can apply in every way in our Krishna consciousness, is that if you want to achieve something, you have to have a positive relationship with it. So some people have a negative relationship with money, but they want to become wealthy. It doesn't work because, it's like you've created a barrier. I could never be humble. It's a barrier. Say I'm not humble now, but I would love to be. I'm attracted to it, or whatever the quality is. That is the foundation because that pulls you towards it. So if I say I could never become this, you've already concluded or have written in stone that this will never happen. And it's programming us to believe that, even though we're not aware of that. By saying I could never do this, it's like, okay, well, you will never do it. You've stated it. That's a reality. If you can state a negative into reality, why not state a positive into reality? I will never do this. And everyone will say, you are right. You will never do it because you're convinced you'll never do it. So why not say, someday I will do this. Someday I would like to do this. This is beautiful. I want to be this way. There's a story. Well, you don't know, but I will tell you. There's a story of the older story, maybe 100 years ago or 80 years ago, of one of the wealthiest men in India. And he was on the roof of his house looking out on the street. And he saw a sannyasi walking by. He was just looking at him. And he looked very depressed. And his wife said, you look very depressed. It's like you have everything. Like, I don't understand why you're depressed. And he said, you see that sannyasi? He said, I'm depressed because I want to be like him. So that's a nice desire, that he had he's the wealthy man, but he has a very positive connotation towards renunciation. And that will attract him and empower him to be able to do it. So whatever it is you want to achieve or whoever it is you want to be, you have to have a positive vision of that, both that in the sense that this is what I want, it's attractive, and then I can achieve it by Krishna's mercy. Okay. Turnoff, I think he wants to say something. Probably on something we were discussing before. Correct? Your hand.
Yeah. Well, I love the point that you're making right now. It's super far out. I'm just thinking about Prabhupada. He got the instruction from Bhaktisiddhanta, and it took him. I guess he never said, "I cannot do this." I mean, what an instruction! Spread
Yeah.
this around the world. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it took him what 20 years or something to do it. So he
40.
just
More than
40
that.
years. I was just thinking too, along with that, if do I have the faith that Krishna will empower me? It's almost like that's the ingredient to get to that place. I
Mm.
need to actually have the faith because it's Krishna that's going to do it through me, not me that's going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, okay, I need to build the faith to be able to
Yeah.
do that instruction. I was just considering that point.
Well,
Um,
it's a really good point that this brings up. You finished? Is that you want to
well,
say?
I had something else about your previous point, but if you
Let
want
me
to
let me
go
address
on,
this first so I don't,
yeah, go ahead.
and then you can make the next point. So when we become devotees, we come to Krishna consciousness with a conception of ourself, who we are, which is a conception of our self as a body, mental body, physical body. So this conception has limitations based on our identity of who we are, what I can do, what I can accomplish, what I can accomplish. I could, So all this I never could, that's all we bring that all when we become devotees. Like if I say Vrindavan, could you imagine doing this or being this? And Vrindavan says, no, I could never imagine that. It's not my nature, it's not who I am. So all of us have that. Could you ever imagine? I could never imagine being in this position or having these material possessions or having these Vaishnav qualities or having this level of renunciation, whatever it is. We all have that right now, and it's good to recognize that. And in relation to what Maternov is saying, if we want to expand our service beyond those limitations, then two things are required, as Maternov said: empowerment, realizing that we can be empowered, and also perhaps adjusting those conceptions to pull down the limitations in realizing that these are self-made limitations and they may not at all be true. It's not like you should, jump off a mountain if you can't fly, obviously. But there are things probably we could do that we limit ourselves from doing because it's just we've never done them before. And we've never grew up thinking we could do such things or be such things. In my case, I was kind of like, I was put, my chair doesn't like to stay up. In my case, as a devotee, as a very young devotee, I was put into positions that I was never in before. So I got to see my capabilities were greater than I thought. And sometimes the only way you'll ever know is to be in a position that's difficult for you and you rise to the occasion, right? And you thought, I never thought I could do that. I never thought I was that kind of person. So at least it's something to consider that we all have limitations, and you can see, if you look at your life, how those limitations are working out. Just look at what you do, what you don't do. Okay, Maternov, you have the next point.
Yeah, on your previous point of how we have to be careful from the letters what we're hearing and not sticking to one thing and thinking that's the end all around that, as Prabhupada is saying. When we were in Vrindavan last year, I think it was the night before, we were at the Goshala and we were, I think, discussing the point on chanting and really being in a place of deep meditation on Krishna, even Krishna's pastimes, even, Krishna, please, talking to Krishna, please, I want to reciprocate with your love, like this. Like we're doing things while we're chanting. And then the next morning at Krishna Balaram Mandir, a sannyas was reading during the announcements at, I don't know when they do it, at like 7 in the morning or something. And he was quoting Srila Prabhupada about chanting, and he said, I think it was just before the japa was going to start. So maybe it was at like 6 in the morning or something. And he said, so this is what here's what Prabhupada said to Malati, that you just hear the holy name. That's all you do. Nothing else. Just hear the holy name and focus on the sounds. Nothing else. And then he said, does everyone understand? That's what we're going to do. Only hear the holy name and focus on the sound. And it was like the night before, we just had this completely other inspiring discussion about how deep we can go in our chanting. And you said that's an instruction Prabhupada said, if we can't do this, if we can't go and have this beautiful expansive experience with the holy name. that was,
And
that was just
you know, what was the year of that instruction? Like 1967. How long had she been a
right.
devotee? You know, like 3 months. You know, what was her experience before she was a devotee? What was her qualification? So it's like, I want you to do something and you're messing it up, right? And I go, okay, just take these pencils, these 100 pencils, put them over there. Just take this paper, put it over here, and I'll come in and do the rest. It's like that. Like, okay, let's make this simple. Just here, because you're not ready for anything else. So that's a very good point of taking that one instruction and making it universal. And um, as you know, we don't talk about that in the japa courses because Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he elaborates on the moods and methods of chanting, which just go much more deeply. So many acharyas do. So yeah, that's a very good point. Be careful of those 1967 instructions. They're really for new devotees. They might be very, you know, simplified, just like, okay, just do this. If you can't be absorbed in going deep in the holy name, just hear it, just hear. It will come from, you know, that's all you can do, then just do that. Just do that. Good point. Um, Talia says, this age of confusion and disassociation, the abusive behavior is normalized. How can we awake the protection of negativity in our lives? If japa can be polluted, that means every aspect, bhakti marg can be polluted. Yeah, it's true. Projection. Yeah, she means projection of negativity. Well, the simple answer is don't make a good thing bad by your consciousness. You can make a bad thing good and a good thing bad. And just because externally it's good, it doesn't mean your attitude is good. Right? Like we were talking in the humility course. You could act humbly, but the reason you're doing that is you want people to think you're humble. So you're doing the right thing for the wrong reason. And if you have a choice, sometimes doing the wrong thing for the right reason is better than doing the right thing for the wrong reason. Like the famous story of Vidura, his wife offered Krishna banana peels. That was the wrong thing to do, but she did it out of bhakti, out of love, and Krishna accepted it. The wrong thing for the right reason. There's another story. It's very early in the movement. A devotee named Kanchan Bala. She was very young. She was still in high school. And she made an altar at home, and she had all kinds of leaves and twigs and, I don't know, pine needles, pine cones, like everything in the three worlds that you wouldn't put on an altar, she had on her altar. You know, all natural, all from nature. Who knows what she had? I don't know. Bird feathers, you know, like whatever. And she took a picture of it and showed Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, very nice. So, but actually, if you read her or hear her description, pretty much everything on the altar was not very nice. So what was very nice? Her mood was very nice. So she did the wrong thing with the right mood. And then you'll hear so many times Prabhupada chastising devotees for being proud. Not for doing the wrong thing, doing the right thing, but being proud while they're doing it. Isn't that interesting? Like, he would often tell pujaris not to become proud because this is Krishna and you're not qualified to serve him, and he's letting you serve him. Don't become proud of your service. He wasn't criticizing that they were doing anything wrong externally. He was criticizing the mood. So I was telling Mathura, and I think I told you in another course that one of Prabhupada's godbrothers said, one of the things you should avoid doing, or one of the things you should do, is get out of the way. Get out of the way. Did I mention this before? Get out of the way. Does anyone remember? A devotee came to Prabhupada's godbrother, Sridhar Maharaj. After Prabhupada left, he was confused. It was a difficult time. He said, what should I do? And he said, well, you could become a guru. That's difficult. You could do that, but that's not easy. You could find a senior Vaishnava and follow them, because your guru has left. If you need guidance from a senior, if you're feeling that, missing, find a senior. He said, and the third thing is, if you don't do 1 and 2, at least get out of the way. And get out of the way is don't make things worse. So I once posted on Facebook, I said, there's nothing you can't do to make ISKCON worse. Like, we could all make ISKCON worse. We could all make our spiritual lives worse, right? So I thought that was a very interesting instruction. So you can take something good and make it bad by your consciousness. Take something bad and make it good by your consciousness. And there's nothing you can't do to take something good and make it bad. Like, we all could do that. Right? Correct. I'm just thinking, I hope I don't forget to give class tonight at 6 o'clock. Somebody call me up. Missing this class was just like, that's okay, but missing that one, that's not a good. Hare Krishna. Send me more brain medicine, Juliana. It's like something's not working. Gee. Hare Krishna. Mm, yeah. So, as you probably know, Prabhupada talked a lot about the mood, because everything in bhakti is about the mood. It's not like the external is important because you do the external to please Krishna. But if you do the external properly, but your mood is not to please Krishna, it's not good. And as we talked about in the humility class, a lot of times we're doing something properly because we want others to see that we're doing it properly. So we do it perfectly for the wrong reason, not to please Krishna, but to please our ego. Because when I do something to get others to notice me, I'm doing it to please my ego. I'm not doing it to please Guru and Krishna, right? Correct? And as many devotees said, if you were there last night, if you weren't, I can tell you, in the exercise, what do you want people to believe about you? That's not true. Many devotees said, I want them to believe this or that because I want to be accepted. I want to be acknowledged, And that's all ego pleasing. And that really has nothing to do with bhakti, but we do it all the time, don't we? So it's like, who do you want to please? Krishna Maybe. Guru, maybe. Ego, yeah, that's the one I want to please. Okay, well, if that's the one you want to please, you're going to have to take birth again. Because if you try to go back to Godhead, they'll see that and they'll say, you got to go back and get rid of that. Because if you're going to go to the spiritual world, you have to want to please Krishna, not yourself. And I have this little video in my mind. You go back to Godhead and nobody notices you, and you get upset like a little kid. How come everyone's neglecting me? And they're just like oh, worshiping Krishna and everything, and nobody even notices me. Is that what you're going to do when you go to the spiritual world? And who are you going to complain to? Or, the gopis or something. I'm being neglected by Krishna, and the gopis will go, so are we. But it's going to be different. Yeah. So it doesn't work up there. You can't do that, right? So it's really good to get this idea clear. Who do I want to please, Guru, Krishna, or my ego? Because whenever we're doing service, but we want acknowledgement for it, then it's like, okay, Krishna, I'm doing this for you. Gurudev, I'm doing it for you. Prabhupada, I'm doing it for you. And ego, I'm doing it for you also. No. Just take the first three and eliminate the fourth, and you'll be good. That's where the problem is, right? And that's what we've been doing forever. And that's why we're still here. Now, I have a question for you. Do you like the material world? If your answer is no, then stop trying to please your ego, because that's what's going to keep you here. Correcto? Correcto. Yeah. We say in Spanish, tiene sentido. Can you feel it? You feel what I'm saying? Tiene sentido. You feel it? Do you feel it? Do you get it? Yeah. Hare Krishna. So Vrindavan says, we can see some devotees do it with correct inner mood, but ignore the externals to the point that they judge people who are too much into external. Oh, this is the trap. This is a trap. It depends what you're doing. In deity worship, externals are very important because you can't just like, here, Krishna, here's your offering. Oh, I forgot Tulsi. Oh, we'll give you Tulsi tomorrow. Just take it. Don't bother me. You're too demanding. You can't deal with the deities that way. Unless you have prema, then you can. Then you can go on the altar and the deities will talk to you. Like, where's the ghee on the chapati? I'm too busy, and the deity, you'll argue with the deity and, it'll all be out of love. So in terms of externals, like with japa, totally you could perfect the externals and chant horrible japa, right? So there is truth to that, but I wouldn't say it's true in every situation. Because there are proper ways to do things that will please Krishna. So the external becomes part of the mood. Well, if I have the right mood, then I will do it this way because it'll please Krishna. So that's there also. And there also we have the example, I could do the external mood, I could do the externals perfectly and not at all be in the right mood. And so you don't want that. That's really bad. Not really bad. It's just not good. So I think that is true, but it depends. That can be taken to an extreme. The problem is if we say the externals are not important, but Prabhupada said those externals are important, then you're in trouble now because you are now disagreeing with Prabhupada. I put my Jagannath so you could see him better, but my head is, see my Jagannath? Where is it? There. But then when I sit like this, you can't see him. You have to sit like this. We're not perfectly centered. All right, we'll sit like this. You can see Jagannath, but then you can't see the other Jagannath. What to do? Maybe I'll just go like this, rock back and forth. Yeah, sometimes the devotee will say, well, the externals, whatever, not important. It may be true, but you have to be careful that it's not something in which Prabhupada said the externals are important. You know, you can say, ISKCON, it's an institution, it's not that important. The real thing is bhakti. Okay, that's true, but ISKCON was important for Prabhupada, so you know, like you have to be careful. Sometimes you feel something and it seems true, but you have to be careful. It's not contradicting something that Prabhupada said. Sometimes that happens because, you know, he's looking at it differently than we are in some cases. So I could say A, B, and C is not important. Later to find out, Prabhupada said A, B, and C is very important. So we have to be careful. Like you have to know what you're talking about. Like when you say externals are not important, all right, which externals are you talking about? That you should know, because some of them are. And I always thought perfecting the externals is often a manifestation of perfecting, it's an external manifestation of perfecting the internals. So it could be like that, right? Perfecting the externals does not assume that you're not perfecting the internals. Sometimes it's proof that you are, right? Yes, good. Yes, good. Um, yeah. Mm, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to give you 15-minute bonus if you want to stay another 20 minutes because we started late. Well, it's not really a bonus. It's you deserved it because you came earlier. So we can continue if you want. So there's two things we can do. Some of you can suggest examples, Prabhupada's examples that we can discuss, or you can ask questions, or you can make comments. Any of those would be good.
But other devotees say that it disagrees with, Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Jiva Goswami's opinion.
Oh yeah, that's a can of worms now. That's a difficult one. That was Dhanaraj's comment from the invisible. Oh, he's driving. Yeah. I was thinking about this, Dhanaraj, the other day. And when I was a young devotee, we only had Prabhupada's books. There were no other books. Nobody was reading anything. And I had mentioned in class the other day, I actually mentioned it last night, that many devotees who could read Sanskrit had difficulty because they were reading a lot of books from past acharyas that, and in the time, in the time of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, things in which they were teaching, things were different. And so some things they said appear to contradict Srila Prabhupada. Also, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had disciples who rejected him based on things that he said that they believed were not true. So I think the fundamental principle is that whatever we learn from other acharyas, we want to confirm with Prabhupada. You know, like this, is this what Prabhupada says? Or if it doesn't seem to be what he said, how can we negotiate, so to speak, so it does support what Prabhupada said? Um, you know, there was a time that when you got initiation, you got your what's called Ekadas Bhav. You were told who you were in Krishna Lila. That was part of it. Siddha Deha. Juliana, your name is Julie Gopi. and you are 12 years old, you wear a red sari, your service is to make cow patties. You are in this camp, and I want you to meditate on that. That was what you got in initiation. That became your meditation. If that meditation didn't work for you, then Julie Gopi comes back to me and says, I think I'm Julie Gopa. I think I'm Jim Gopa, not Julie Gopi. I like that, Sakya Ross is more, okay, let's try Jim Gopa. You wear a blue dhoti and so that's how it worked. And that went through the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So now if you read something from the Acharyas at that time, they may be describing that, and it can be confusing because Bhaktisiddhanta didn't do that. He gave Harinam, that was the initiation, just as we give it. There was no giving of anything other than that, because he was giving initiation to people who weren't so qualified. So that's what he did. It stops with him. Bhaktivinoda, and previously after Mahaprabhu, it started. And so there can be confusion there because now you'll read books of the Acharyas, maybe they're all describing that. So, we have to take things into context with Srila Prabhupada's teachings. And yeah, it can be very helpful to read the books of other acharyas because they elaborate and explain things that Prabhupada explained, but they elaborate on it more so we can understand it more clearly. Then, Dhanaraj, somebody's going to say, well, Prabhupada said, everything's in my books. But in his books, he said, read the Sandarbhas or read Brihad Bhagavatamrita. So, yeah, it's a problem. Because maybe in Gaudiya Math they believe something or they do something that Prabhupada told us differently. Now, how do you deal with that? That's a whole other issue. But you can just follow, if you're confused, you can ask your guru. Make it simple for yourself. Oh, now we have the where do we come from question. Now things are going to get really interesting and everybody's going to wake up. So here's the question. Prabhupada said we came from the spiritual world, and some devotees say that we didn't. Srila Prabhupada just encouraged people to chant. The hippies, even though they had all kinds of habits, just encouraged, yes. So can both be true, that some came from the spiritual world and some souls didn't? Oh, Krishna. This is such an interesting question. There are two kinds of souls, those who are eternally liberated and those who are not. Can the eternally liberated become not eternally liberated? That's the concept of falling from the spiritual world, that the eternally liberated would now not be eternal. Can that happen? Well, many acharyas say it can't happen. You can't fall from an eternally liberated position. And so there are eternally liberated associates of Krishna. They cannot fall, that's for sure. Mother Yasoda can't fall, right? That's not possible. And when you go back to the spiritual world, Krishna says you will not fall. Let's give Prabhupada's answer. Well, Prabhupada basically said, well, you could say you fell from the spiritual world, or you could say you were eternally in the material world. But right now, here you are. So it matters more as a siddhanta, as a tattva, but pragmatically it doesn't matter so much because the process is the same. And the reason we're in, even if you say you fell from the spiritual world because you turned your back on Krishna, or you say you've always been in the material world and you've always turned your back on Krishna, it amounts to the same thing. Your back's turned to Krishna and you have to turn around. Right? That's really what we're dealing with. So everybody, Krishna's here. So just turn, Krishna's here and we're facing here. So just turn around and come like that. Everything's good. This is an interesting question because acharyas, many acharyas say that we have eternally been in the material world, anadi karma. Our karma is eternal. We've been here forever. Which won't make you feel so bad that you didn't turn your back on Krishna. You just turned, well, I didn't see him and turn my back. I just always turn my back. You know, if you have a guilty conscience about turning your back on Krishna, this theory is a little less aggressive because you never were with him and turned away. You were always away, and now you can turn towards him. ISKCON has not resolved this, and this is why I don't want to say anything, because it's kind of like, you know, when you're in an institution and you're a leader, the institution has followed Prabhupada's line of thinking, where generally he says we were with Krishna and we fell. Although some say that's not substantiated in Gaudiya of the Acharyas, Gaudiya philosophy, but this is what Prabhupada explained. So I think you can substantiate either idea. Certainly you can substantiate the idea that we fell down from Srila Prabhupada. You could also substantiate the idea we didn't fall down from Srila Prabhupada. And you can certainly substantiate the idea we didn't fall down from many acharyas. But here we are, everyone. We're down. Whether we fell from the 10th floor or we appeared fallen, we just ended up here fallen. Here we are, fallen. And in one life, you can go back to Krishna. Wow, that's amazing, right? The end of this life, you could be in Krishna Lila. Isn't that amazing? So if at the end of this life, I can be in Krishna Lila, well, that's what's important, how to do that. And I just hope ISKCON resolves this issue for all of you, because it brings up Dhanaraj's point. And I don't know if he was directly thinking like this, but maybe yes. How do you deal with something in Shastra which appears to be a little different than what Prabhupada said? How do you deal with the teachings of Acharyas? Yeah, that's an issue that's not discussed a lot in our movement. Now, some devotees who are a little bold, you could say, they don't discuss the issue of the jiva falling from the spiritual world. And the reason they don't discuss it is they just say, he didn't. We didn't fall. They just say it bluntly. We did not fall from the spiritual world. We have eternally been in the material world. And that's it. That's just what they teach. And they teach that because they say, I can substantiate that with the teachings of the Goswamis. That's what they taught. And ISKCON devotees will object to that, some of them. That's not what Prabhupada taught. And they will even object that you can substantiate it with the teachings of the Acharyas. Now what do we do? Who do we shoot? The no-fall vadis or the fall vadis? Who's right, who's wrong? Yeah. So that is really an issue, I think, that the leaders of ISKCON need to deal with. And there were some resolutions to deal with this. And I don't think any of the resolutions have been addressed yet. And one of my godbrothers has a resolution saying, you know, it's like, it's inconceivable. This is inconceivable, and, you know, then maybe we misunderstand what Prabhupada's saying. Another devotee another devotee said, well, why don't we say you could say anything you want if you can back it up with Shastra? Like, whatever you say, you fell, you didn't fall, we all were dinosaurs reincarnated, whatever you say, back it up with Shastra, then it's okay. Which is that's interesting way of approaching it. But these ideas have been going around with the GBC, I believe. So, yes, here we are. And just be careful. There's so many books you can read, and always try to represent Prabhupada's teaching as best you can. Then, what about kirtans from other sanghas? Oh, well, let's go back to this question, because we're on the topic of fall. So Dhanaraj says, didn't the book, Our Original Position by Hridayananda Maharaj, answer this as well? Not necessarily to the satisfaction of everyone. I know that much. Yeah. It's for those of you who don't know what we're talking about. Prabhupada seemed to teach mostly that we were with Krishna in Leela, we turned our back on Krishna. And when we turned our back on Krishna, we came into the material world. And here we are. In some places, Prabhupada said, nobody falls from the spiritual world. It appears to be a contradiction, like in the story of Jai and Vijay. They came, but that was Leela. So Prabhupada said, nobody falls from the spiritual world. Like, okay, we fell from the spiritual world, but nobody falls from the spiritual world. And then one devotee wrote a few letters to Prabhupada. You can see these letters, the conversation. Did we fall or didn't we? And what I find interesting about these letters, Prabhupada is a little ambiguous about it. And he could have just said, yes, we fell. No, we didn't. But in his last letter to that, he said, whether you think you fell or you didn't, you're here and it doesn't matter. So he could have just said, you did fall or you didn't. He didn't say it. But in most of the references to did we fall or didn't we fall, he said we did, which is why you have that book by Hridayananda Maharaj. And there are different references. Back to Godhead. How do you go back to Godhead if you've never been there? Bhagavatam, you're my old friend. How are you old friend if you never saw him? So the interesting point about this discussion is no one, if you ask any devotee in Gaudiya Mat or Gaudiya Vaishnavism, where do we fall from? They will all say, we didn't fall. You didn't fall, you're always here. They'll all say that. And Prabhupada said we fell. That's where the problem comes. That's what makes it interesting. So that's something that I think ISKCON on the top levels has to deal with. And that book dealt with what Prabhupada said, but it didn't, and it tried to say that the acharyas didn't say anything different. But that's not true. They did. Otherwise, how is everyone in Gaudiya Math saying we didn't fall if that's not what the acharyas said? So it's interesting. At the very least, it's an interesting hermeneutical dilemma, isn't it? So, but my dear devotees, you can still go back to guided, whatever you think, because the process is the same. We all turned our back on Krishna, right? That was a bad move. Okay, that's the best we can do for now. If you want to know more, you can talk to me offline. That way I don't get into trouble and I don't make enemies. Because whatever I say one way or the other, I've got enemies. I'll make enemies, right? So I can only best describe kind of the history. But as I said, there are devotees in ISKCON who are very outwardly outspoken about this, who say, no, we didn't fall. And even if that's true, it seems Prabhupada had his reasons for saying we did. So we have a few more minutes. What about listening to kirtan from other sanghas? We want to listen to kirtan from pure devotees. That's it. Because if you listen to a nice kirtan, but it's not from pure devotees, then you pick up the impurity of the people singing. And if you listen to bad kirtans in ISKCON sung by pure devotees, then you become purified. So bad kirtan, quote unquote, musically, sung by a pure devotee is better than a sweet, musically beautiful kirtan sung by an impure devotee. And if you are chanting your rounds properly, you can immediately hear a kirtan and think, this is pure or this is not pure. You'll just feel it. Yes? Have you any of you had that experience? Like someone's leading kirtan and you feel like this is the real thing. And someone else is leading it and you feel like, nah, something's wrong. Something's wrong. This is not. It's a nice melody. Everything's nice, but something's wrong. So we should be sensitive to that, right? Because the consciousness of the person singing comes through. Did you ever notice that, like in rock and roll, you can like feel this consciousness coming through? Because a lot of the rock and roll bands were like living a very licentious lifestyle with drugs and sex, and and it's kind of like just pervades the whole mood of the music, isn't it? Yeah, you can feel it. Yeah. Someone is singing a love song, maybe to someone who's departed, you can feel that, that separation. It comes through, right? So if someone is singing in devotion humbly to Krishna, it comes through, and then you benefit. But if they don't have that, then you don't benefit. Gabriela says, the unconscious psychological human relationships are mostly based on pleasing the false ego. What is it like to have a relationship in Krishna consciousness? Krishna is the center. We both try to please him. That's like so simple, isn't it? Krishna consciousness just means what will please Krishna. What are you going to do after this class that'll please Krishna? Right? Oh, Prabhu, I was thinking of watching the football game. Okay, is that going to please Krishna? I was thinking of turning my wife into a slave and have her, cook a 10-course feast for me. Will that please Krishna? Like everything is like, is this, what Krishna wants? Will this make him happy? And even if it's something you like to do, like there's things that I like to do, and I always think, how can I do this in a way that will please Krishna? Even though maybe I wouldn't even do it if I didn't like to do it. But because I like to do it, then I can't just do it because I like to do it. I have to think, how can I do this in a way that will please Krishna? Because I like to do it. So let's say I like to act. So I'm going to go down to the local theater and get a part in Shakespeare. Okay, why? Because I like to act. Why not create a drama troupe and act Leela for Krishna or some play that can explain our philosophy? Jamie, do you know? Jamie's an actor. Or I don't know if you still are. I don't know. That's the association is not so great. But Prabhupada once saw play, I think it was The Kidnapping of Rukmini. And after the play, Prabhupada said, "This is better than the books." Prabhupada really liked drama. So if you like drama, that's good. If you like singing music, that's good because, you know, the whole movement's about it. If you like to cook, that's good. So there's some things in our movement. It's just you're fortunate if you like to do those things because if you like to talk, if you like to study, if you like to sing, play instruments, cook, serve out prasadam, you know, good for you. And if you like to act, yeah. But the idea is we're not just going to act anything. I'm not just going to sing anything. I like to sing. I like to sing songs in English. So what am I doing? I'm singing Shastakam in English. All glories to the chanting of your holy name. How does that go? Which cleanses the heart of all. What is it? All glories to the chanting of your holy name. I forgot already. Wow. Juliana, send that medicine. I can remember if I'm playing. Hold on. Don't go anywhere. Maybe I can find the words on my computer. Stay tuned. Stay right where you are. Just so I can prove. Just so I can prove that I like to sing in English. Verse 1. Here are the words. All glories to the chanting of your holy name, which cleanses the heart of all dirty things. It makes the fire of samsara forever die, and will cause the lotus of good fortune to arise. And you all know the chorus. Your holy name is glorious. Your holy name is victorious. Your holy name is glorious. Your holy name is victorious. Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. It's the life and soul of all wisdom divine, increasing the ocean of bliss for all time. It cools the heart and bathes the soul, lets us taste the nectar we're always anxious for. Your holy name is glorious. Your holy name is victorious. Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. So I just wanted to show you that this propensity to write songs, this is all completely based on Shashastakam verse 1. And you can recognize it, right? And then I said, your holy name is glorious, your holy name is victorious. That's Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtan. That's what he means. And the last line of the song, you want to hear the last line? This is, if I can, I think I may have. The last line of the song is, and one who chants your holy name is glorious too. That's how it ends. Param Vijayate Sri Krishna. The holy name is glorious. You become glorious when you chant. So it's taking a propensity that I have to write songs, sing songs, create music, and using that in Krishna's service. Otherwise, I'm going to sing about whatever. The grass is beautiful, the sky is blue, the mountains are green, and I love you. You know, what am I going to sing? I'll sing my way into another body, right? And then I'll want everyone to love me for my songs. If they don't love me, I don't want to talk to them. Or maybe if my song doesn't become popular, I'll commit suicide. Who knows? But for Krishna, you do it for his pleasure, and you get 10 hits or 10 million hits. It's like whatever. You did it for his pleasure, so it's perfect, right? And you have this desire to do it, You just do it for his glorification. You have to do it because it's your nature, so you do it. And don't be afraid to do it. Just let it come out. Yes, whatever you can do it for Krishna, because it's your nature. So do it for Krishna. I was listening to a class I gave. I don't know when I gave it, but it was nonstop jokes. It's like the whole thing was just like so funny. It's like that's my nature sometimes. I get funny and I can't stop. So I can use it in Krishna's service to make us laugh at our stupidity. Right? All right. I don't know what, yeah. So it's all about pleasing Krishna, whether it's relationship or anything. How can we together please Krishna? What can we do to help spread Krishna consciousness? Mm. Mm. Yeah, you turn to me now, but you're far from home. So, oh. Just to create more controversy. Are you into more controversy? Can you stand it? Are you totally confused now? You're going to be up all night. Did I fall from Vaikuntha or have I always been here? And you're like, I can't sleep. We have to resolve this. So, back to Godhead. That's the name of the magazine. And Prabhupada talks about back to Godhead. So the reasoning is obviously, if I'm going back to Godhead, I must have fallen from there, right? Otherwise, what does that mean? So that statement apparently was taken by Prabhupada from a lecture, maybe by the Archbishop of Canterbury or someone of that stature. I forget exactly who. And he said in his lecture, it's time for us to go back to Godhead. And what he meant was that previously in society, maybe 50, 100 years previously, people were God conscious. So he's saying we need to go back to that period of time when people are were God conscious. We need to go back to Godhead. That's what he meant. That's interesting. That just like upgrades the controversy to a new level of controversy, doesn't it? It doesn't mean we were with Krishna in the spiritual world. It means he meant we have to go back to a godly society. Hare Krishna. So, these are interesting topics, quite a bit academic, and I'm hoping the GBC will address this at some point. I think it's necessary. Okay, Jamie has a dilemma. He's learning harmonium, and he's not yet a pure devotee. I can solve your dilemma. Krishna, please accept my horrible harmonium playing. I'm doing it for your pleasure. And if you don't get any messages or dreams where Krishna says, stop playing, I don't like the way you play, then you can continue. Every master was first a disaster. Hare Krishna. Okay, I think we got everybody. Now, if we call the spiritual world our home, yeah, because that's where we're going to live eternally. So, it is our home. Whether we've come from there or not, it is our home. All right. Well, we'll see some of you tonight. We saw some of the European devotees last night in our class. That meant for them that they were up from 12 a.m. to 3:30 a.m. listening. Well, I don't know if they were listening, but they're definitely trying to stay awake. I could see that. Whether they were listening, that's another thing. But for those of you who are coming tonight, we will see you. And Hare Krishna to everyone. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Sorry for being late. Some screws are loose in my brain. I have to screw them back so I don't forget. Okay. Gauranga Nityananda. Go Premananda. Hari Hari Bol.